My name is Margaret Wilson. I am 59 years old. At this age, most people think life slows down, that you should stay quiet, that you should tolerate disrespect because family matters. Asterisk. But what happened to me that evening changed my life forever and taught me a lesson I will never forget. A mother's sacrifice. Asterisk. I raised my son, Daniel, alone. His father left when Daniel was just 3 years old. No phone calls, no birthdays, no child support. Asterisk. It was just me, a small apartment, and a heart full of determination. Asterisk. I worked 2 jobs, cleaned offices at night, served coffee in the mornings. Asterisk. Skipped meals so my son could eat better. I didn't complain, because when Daniel smiled, my tired body felt strong again. Asterisk. I told myself one thing every day. Asterisk. One day, my son will stand tall, and all this pain will be worth it. The wedding that changed everything. Years passed. Asterisk. Daniel grew into a respectful, intelligent young man. He became an engineer. He met a woman named Rachel. Asterisk. At first, I was happy. Asterisk. She came from a wealthy family. Her parents lived in a big house, luxury cars, perfect smiles, but something always felt off. Asterisk. Her mother, Linda, looked at me like I didn't belong. She never said it directly, but her eyes said everything. Asterisk. You're lucky to be here at the wedding reception. Linda leaned close to me and whispered, "You should be grateful. People like you don't usually get invited to weddings like this." I smiled politely. I didn't want to ruin my son's big day. Asterisk. I stayed quiet. The first humiliation after the wedding. Daniel and Rachel invited both families for a welcome dinner at their new house. I arrived early, simple dress, clean hands, a heart full of love. I went to the kitchen to help. That's when Linda looked at me and said, "Asterisk, please don't touch anything. This kitchen is expensive." I froze. Still, I said nothing. The soup instant and dinner was served. Asterisks. Linda had prepared a large pot of hot soup. Asterisk. She suddenly turned toward me and said loudly, "Asterisk, some people don't know their place at the table." Everyone went silent. Then it happened. Asterisk. She threw the hot soup directly at my face. Asterisk. The heat burned my skin. The shock froze my body. The humiliation broke my heart. Asterisk. I could smell soup on my clothes. But what hurt more was the laughter. Some people laughed. My son looked away. I looked at Daniel, my son. Asterisk. The boy I raised with bleeding hands and sleepless nights. Asterisk. He didn't say a word. He looked down. That moment hurt more than the burn. Asterisk. I stood up slowly. My face was burning. My hands were shaking, but my voice was calm. I said, "Asterisk, I'm leaving." Linda smirked. "Good. People like you bring bad energy." Asterisk. The call that changed everything. I walked out, sat in my old car. Tears rolled down my face. Then I picked up my phone. I made one call, a call I had never planned to make. Asterisks, but one that changed everything. I sat in my car for nearly 10 minutes. My face still burned, but my heart burned more. At 59 years old, I had been insulted, humiliated, and treated like trash by someone who had no idea who I really was. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, and I made the call. The call no one expected. I dialed a number I hadn't used in over 20 years. The phone rang once, twice, then a familiar voice answered. "Margaret, is that really you?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I need a favor." There was a short pause. "Anything," the voice replied. Flashback. A life they never knew 25 years earlier, before I became the quiet, struggling single mother. I was not weak. I worked as a financial operations manager at a private investment firm in New York. I helped build companies from nothing. I solved problems others couldn't. But when my husband abandoned us, I walked away from everything. Career, status, power. I chose my son, and no one at that dinner table knew that. The man on the other end, the man I called, was Richard Hawley, a respected corporate consultant, a man whose opinion could destroy reputations or save companies. He owed me his career. Years ago, when he was about to be fired, I covered for him, I trained him, I protected him. Now, he was returning the favor. "I want you to look into one family," I said. "There's a woman named Linda Carter, her family business. I want you to look into it." Richard's voice hardened. "What happened?" "She humiliated me publicly." There was silence. Then he said, "Give me 48 hours." Back at the house inside the house, Linda was still laughing. "Did you see her face? People like her should know their place." Daniel finally spoke. "Mom didn't deserve that." Linda snapped back. "She's lucky I didn't call the police." Rachel stayed quiet. That silence would haunt her later. The first crack appears the next morning. Linda received a call, then another dot, then an email. Her smile began to fade. Her company's largest investor had requested a meeting. Her bank asked for documents. Her accountant suddenly stopped returning calls. She didn't understand why yet. "My son came to my door that evening." Daniel showed up at my small apartment. His eyes were red. "Mom, sorry." I looked at him and said calmly, "I didn't raise you to stay silent when someone is abused." He cried. I was scared. I placed my hand on his shoulder. Fear doesn't excuse betrayal, but it can be healed. The truth begins to surface. Richard called me back. "Margaret, this is worse than I thought." I closed my eyes. "Tell me." "Tax irregularities, hidden lawsuits, bribed inspectors." I exhaled slowly. "Proceed." "The storm is coming." Linda still thought she had one. She still believed I was just an old woman with no power. She had no idea. The storm had already started. The next 72 hours changed everything. Not because I shouted, not because I begged, but because truth has weight, and when it starts falling, no amount of money can stop it. Linda's perfect world begins to crack. Linda Carter woke up to chaos. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her assistant's voice trembled. "Mrs. Carter, the board wants an emergency meeting." She snapped back. "Tell them I'm busy." But power doesn't wait. By noon, her credit line was frozen. By evening, her company website was offline. By night, her name was trending, and not in a good way. She didn't understand. She kept asking the same question. Who would dare do this to me? She never once thought of the quiet woman she humiliated. Rachel. Finally, Rachel came to my apartment alone. No designer bag, no perfect smile, just fear. "I didn't know my mother was like this," she said softly. I looked at her carefully. "You knew. You just chose silence." Her eyes filled with tears. "What do I do now?" I answered calmly. "You choose who you want to be." Daniel's breaking point. Daniel called me that night. "Mom, everything is falling apart." I said, "No. What's falling apart is lies," he whispered. "Linda blames you." I smiled faintly. Truth doesn't need defense. The emergency board meeting. Linda sat at the long glass table. For the first time in her life, she wasn't in control. The chairman spoke coldly. "We have evidence of financial misconduct." Linda laughed nervously. "This is a mistake." The screen lit up. Documents, emails, transactions. Her face turned pale. Being removed. The final words came quietly. "Effective immediately. You are suspended pending investigation." Linda stood up, shaking. "You can't do this to me." But they already had. She finally knocks on my door that evening. There was a knock. I opened the door. Linda stood there. No makeup, no confidence, just desperation. "Please," she said. "I didn't know you were someone." I looked at her and replied, "I was always someone. You just didn't see me as human." She broke down. "I'll apologize. I'll say anything." I leaned closer. "This isn't about apologies. It's about accountability." Listen, I teach at 59, I said. "At my age, I've learned one thing. People who humiliate others are afraid of being exposed." Linda collapsed onto the floor. "The choice I gave," Harry said calmly. "You will publicly apologize. You will step away quietly, or the investigation continues." She nodded silently. The tables have turned. The woman who once threw soup at my face was now begging for mercy, and I felt no joy, only peace. The next morning, the apology went public, but it wasn't the victory people imagined. It was something far more powerful. The public apology. No one expected. Linda stood in front of cameras. No luxury suit, no confident posture. Her voice trembled. "I want to publicly apologize to Margaret Wilson for my behavior, my arrogance, and my inhumane actions." People gasped, because this was not normal. Women like Linda never apologized. She continued, "I allowed pride and status to make me cruel. There is no excuse." I watched the broadcast quietly from my living room. No smile, no anger, just stillness. 59 years old, I had learned something important. Closure does not always feel loud. Rachel makes her choice. Rachel came again, this time with Daniel. She looked at me and said, I was raised to believe money makes you superior. Today I learned character. Duh, she turned to Daniel. I'm choosing you. But not my mother's behavior. That moment changed their marriage forever. A son redeems himself. Daniel finally stood tall. He looked me in the eyes and said, Mom, I failed you. I touched his face gently. No, you learned. Tears rolled down his cheeks. I promise you, I will never stay silent again. That promise meant more to me than revenge ever could. Linda's world grows quiet. The investigation continued. She resigned permanently. Her social circle disappeared overnight. People who once praised her now avoided her. That is how shallow power is. One final conversation. Linda requested one last meeting. I agreed. She sat across from me, smaller somehow. Why didn't you destroy me completely? She asked. I answered calmly. Because I didn't need to. She looked confused. I said, you lost everything the moment you believed you were better than others. She cried. The lesson I shared before leaving. I said one final thing. At 59, I don't seek revenge. I seek truth, dignity, and peace. She nodded, silently. Calm. After the storm weeks passed, Daniel and Rachel started fresh. Respect replaced fear. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully. Life did not suddenly become perfect, but it became honest. And at 59 years old, honesty is worth more than comfort. A quiet new beginning. Months passed. The noise faded. The headlines disappeared. What remained was something real. Daniel and Rachel began rebuilding their marriage, this time on respect, not fear. They visited me every Sunday, not out of guilt, out of love. The moment that healed me, afternoon. Daniel said something that healed a wound I had carried for years. Mom, I finally understand how strong you've always been. I smiled because mothers don't need monuments, they need recognition. I returned to myself. I started consulting again, not for money, for purpose. Young professionals sought my guidance. They listened, they respected, they learned. I realized something important. Age does not reduce power, silence does. Linda's final lesson I heard. Linda moved away. No spotlight, no admiration, just consequences. I didn't celebrate because justice doesn't need applause. The truth I want you to hear, let me tell you something, whoever is listening right now. If you are quiet, it does not mean you are weak. If you are kind, it does not mean you are powerless. If you are older, it does not mean your time is over. The world underestimates silent people until they speak. The call was never about revenge. That phone call wasn't about destroying someone. It was about reminding myself who I was. And once I did that, everything changed. My final words at 59. I learned this truth. Never humiliate someone who stayed silent for years. They weren't powerless. They were patient.